Everybody, weekend supervision. I had a few things that I thought I wanted to talk about relative to what we were discussing this week with ethics and confidentiality. Things like, hey, what happens if you're giving counseling to a couple and the non-identified client, in other words, the person who's in the session that's not the identified client wants to request records. Can you give that to them? We talked about stuff like that. We went over some different scenarios, but I wanted to talk about something that came to my mind. I just couldn't resist it because I get fixated on the discussion of narcissist versus codependent, and I just don't think that that's implemented into the commentary of practice enough. But I'm a big proponent of it, so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the question is, does the narcissist really care? Now, I don't know if you have counseled somebody before, if you even been in a relationship with somebody before, if you even know of some people that are close to you that have narcissistic traits. They don't have to have the diagnosis of narcissism, but maybe just the narcissistic traits. And sometimes you ask the question, do they care? Today, I want to give you one tip to help your clients to identify if they are engaged with a narcissist. Okay, just by one question. There are numerous little tips and things that I can give, but I just want to talk about one today. This isn't even the best one. This is just the one I want to emphasize for today. And so this came about because it was a scenario, I'll just say, to where there was somebody who was supposed to be doing something for somebody, and they were like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And they tried to tell the person like, hey, you know what? I was trying to help you. I was going to reach out to you, but such and such happened. And then the person was like, no, you wasn't. You wasn't. And then the person found themselves like in a predicament to where it's like, hey, I really know I was about to do this, but the person that I'm talking to is not receiving it, and they're not receiving a lot of what I'm saying. And I'm starting to feel like I'm having to explain myself a lot. I'm having to prove myself. And see, that's a delicate situation for people who already have a history of that, because they respond to these type of scenarios differently than people who are more confident about not having a need to explain. Okay. And so this scenario came up, and I thought that, you know what? This is a point that I think people need to know when they're working with their clients. They need to know it for themselves as well. And the point is that anytime you're repeatedly having to explain yourself, you must know that there's a strong possibility that you may be speaking with a narcissist. Yeah. You may be speaking to a narcissist. Anyone who you're in company with where you feel like that you're always having to explain. And then, you know what? The things that you explain, they aren't being received. They're not being believed. Not only are they not being received and believed, but they're being the conversation transitions to the point to where now you're starting to feel shame and blame about the situation that was in discussion. Or even more so, your client may be second guessing themselves, because here it is. I thought I was trying to do something right, but after I'm talking to you, it seems like I've been doing so much wrong. So if this has been happening, the question that the client has to ask themselves is, let me see. If this is happening, this is the question that that the client has to ask themselves. The client has to ask themselves, why am I continuing to explain myself to someone who doesn't really seem like they're interested in what I have to say? So this is a big thing that we have to deal with clients. A lot of times it's more codependent, leaning clients that may have an attachment style of anxious, preoccupied, but not just them. This happens to just people who don't have these concerns as well. They find themselves having to try to explain things, but then it's not necessarily being received. And it's certain people in their life, they're having to feel like that they're having to do that over and over and over over again. So this is the technique. This is a technique and an intervention I use because I'm trying to help my supervisees to be able to understand when you see these situations, not only to be able to diagnose, but to also treat, and what some techniques that you can use. Okay. And so what I'm saying is that you want to help the client to know, but that, you know what, the way that you're coming at me, and this is what they're thinking right now, the way that you're coming at me, I'm having to ask myself right now that the way that you're coming at me, like I was trying to help you. You know, I just didn't get to it, or there's some miscommunication because you won't listen to me. So the thing is, the way that you're coming at me, there's two questions that need to be asked, right? The question needs to be asked, number one, is do you even care? You know, because sometimes we're trying to explain things, or your client may be trying to explain things to a person if they have narcissistic traits that has no intentions on hearing or understanding what you have to say. They don't really care. Number two, you need to tell the client to ask themselves this: do you have my best interests? The person that I'm talking to, do you have my best interests? And they've got to put this into practice. I'm telling you, these two, like, I'm giving away my stuff. I need to copyright this, put it somewhere in a book or whatever. But this is the technique. Use it if you find it helpful. The two questions that they need to ask themselves is, do you care? Do you have my best interest? And what I always say is that if the person that you haven't explained things to all the time, if just the answer to one of those questions is no, then you need to stop the conversation or find your way out. And there's some reasons why we need to find our way out. So for instance, here's an example. Somebody says, you know what, you're just a terrible person. I don't see why anybody would want to be in a relationship with you. You're just a terrible person. So we got to step back. Because so when they said, look, you're a terrible person, I don't see that. Okay, so that's an opinion. For one thing, we need to recognize a sorry opinion, but sometimes we're not confident. The client's not confident to understand that, right? But they said, I don't see why somebody would ever want to be with you. So automatically, if someone is saying you're a terrible person, sometimes we're saying, am I? We're starting to question, right? And then they're saying, I don't see why anyone would ever want to be in a relationship with you. So then the mind, just by human nature, starts to want to counter, which is a natural progression. But the problem is when we start to participate in a response to where we're trying to prove something to people who don't have your best interest and who don't care. So the person is being automatically put in a position to defend or explain themselves. No, that's not true. I do this, I do that. Or why would you think it? And see, and that's another thing. If you start asking, and I didn't even put this on my notes, and I'm not going to get into it. I'm going to stick with the script. We'll come back on that. We'll just stick with this. The question, when the person came up to you, told your client they're a terrible person, terrible man, terrible woman, terrible mom, terrible husband, terrible wife, terrible on the job, that's a big one. You just pathetic. I don't even know how you got in here. You know. Okay, so the thing is, okay, am I trying to prove or explain myself to this person? But before I even get to that, I need to ask myself the question. The client needs to ask themselves the question, do you even care? And the second one is, do you have my best interest? Now, if someone does not care or does not have your best interest, then why the heck? And this is psychoeducation that you have to give the client, and you be gentle, but you have to use a little bit of CBT, I guess, and kind of ask them, the question, like, if they don't really care or they don't have your best interest, like, why are you entertaining this? And the answer to that a lot of times is that the person is many times trying to prove it to themselves. They're trying to prove it to that other person, but they're also trying to convince themselves, because when you are already convinced of yourself without anyone else, then you don't have a need to explain. It's like, okay, that's your opinion. I got another opinion, and I got some other opinions that I don't even want to let out on you right now. Okay, so that's what we do. That's what you want to help the client to do, is to and the goal is to stop explaining. Maybe have them journal as to something that indicates why they're explaining themselves, or have the need to explain themselves. Like when somebody comes to you with a tax, have them to journal, like, why am I finding the need to explain myself? This is the reason I had to explain myself, because blah, 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 blah. And a lot of times what you do is find out that many times there's some insecurities that need to be worked out. There needs to be kind of a disconnection with certain parties, or if you're stuck with them in marriage, then you have to relate with them in a different way. So I'm going to stop right there. Prime thing is, if you're in company, if a true way to know that you're likely entertaining a narcissist is that you find yourself always having to explain yourself about things you already know is true, and that you find that this person doesn't seem to have your best interests, they don't care, then we need to stop and cease the conversation. If you need help with that, then you need to get some counseling, and that's okay too. All right, so hopefully you will be able to help your clients or your supervisees to counsel their people who are getting counseling, and then put some of these mechanisms into place. I'm gonna wrap this up. Y'all have a blessed week, and we'll see you again next